I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is my first impressions review of Western Legend Stories. Now this is going to be a slightly new review format for the channel that I'm trying out, aiming to give you a shorter video while trying to give all the main points that are most relevant to helping you make a decision. It won't be used for every game I cover, but I would appreciate your feedback down below. But that said, as far as Western Legend Stories, let's get the most important parts out of the way. This is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and this is very much first impressions because this is a campaign/legacy game. It's not legacy in the sense that you're not ripping things up or tearing them up, but it is going to have that kind of progression. So more campaign than legacy, but it feels, I guess, a bit more legacy in the way it plays, if that makes sense. But it is going to give you that kind of evolving aspect to the gameplay, and I only have one of the episodes in front of me to play. So I have to call this first impressions because this is going to evolve across multiple plays, and I only have the limited experience with what this game is giving you. I'll also have a link to the campaign down below so you can go ahead and check it out for yourself. But with that, to give you a short overview of the general gameplay, the general idea is it's going to fall into the vein of the original Western Legends while having a lot of differences, but it will feel familiar if you have played Western Legends. Western Legends is a sandbox game that kind of lets you go out in the Wild West, exploring the world as you see fit, trying to earn your points throughout the game in whatever way calls you to the most, while also being mindful of the fact that you're going to be leaning into the side of the law, or on the other side of the law, where people and marshals are going to try to capture you in the game, but trying to figure out what is your pathway to victory, while you arm yourself, power up your items and equipments, and work your way towards the victory points in the game. Western Legend Stories is going to maintain that aspect of the game. So you have that core idea of the game is you're trying to earn your legendary points on this track over here. You can lean into martial, wanted, or stay neutral as a citizen, which I don't really recommend. Try to lean your way one way or the other, and then try to earn as many points as possible. Now where the game differs is it's going to give you these episodes. We have these episode decks over here. Worth noting in this prototype, a lot of stuff is going to be in different languages, so again, prototype, everything's subject to change over here, but you're going to have your episode deck, which will give you your starting narrative, what's going on, it'll give you some setup rules, and then you'll start dividing up the decks into different degrees of card sets that are going to give you these things to work for. So in addition to the general idea of the world, of the sandbox world in which you can do whatever you want, you're also going to have these decks that guide you in terms of what direction you're trying to do, because this is going to progress the story. You see, for example, right now we have on the board, we have this gold mine over here, which is one of the places our characters can move towards to take an action, as you'll see on these action cards. And that's going to give you different kinds of action cards. You can go to explore different regions. You can explore new regions in the board with these little question marks. You can go to these forests over here and deal with one of these cards, drawing animal cards. You can go to the trading post, you can go to the gold mine. These are different interaction points you have in the world that you're going to be using your action towards. But you also have these core things that are guiding you towards what you're trying to do. So for example, I mentioned that trading post, and over here we have moving to a trading post. And when you resolve this card, you're going to go ahead and read whatever it says in the back, and you have some degree of story and evolution to the game. But that leaves a card underneath it, move to a forest. And when we clear this one, we've now cleared one of the piles, which means the rest of these are going to go away, and we're going to put out the next day of cards. Effectively, these cards are divided up into these piles that are going to be randomly shuffled and give you different things to work towards. So yes, you can work on multiple piles, but as soon as a pile is cleared, we go ahead and take the next day of cards and put them into their own little piles. In this case, we only have one in each of these day 6 cards, and whichever one of these you do, you'll get rid of the other and continue progressing. That means you kind of have this story progression over here that is always going to give you a variable way to approach things, and more importantly, you'll never get to do all of these cards, which means as you play this game or as you replay this game, you'll have different degrees of exposure to what you actually encountered in this deck, what stories, what interactions you had along the way. But the core idea is it's trying to give you that Western Legends feel of a sandbox adventure, but it's doing so with a bit more of a guided approach in terms of things that you're going to explore and unlock as you go. That's going to be key to this board over here, which you'll see you have all these other boards, which you'll be slowly clipping onto the main board, giving you different ways you're going to expand and grow the board. So let me see where this goes over here. I think it goes over, I'm not going to try to find this, it's over here. No, I had this earlier, I did. But either way, you're going to have these boards that are going to slowly expand outwards, so the map is going to get larger, your ability to move is going to get larger as you get your hands on these various mounts or ability to move faster in the world, and you effectively have a sandbox adventure that is also guided across this episode arc that is going to give you these actions that are going to be expanded upon and explored upon, well, expanded upon. You're going to have more and more actions you can take in this world that is going to be spoon-fed to you one episode at a time, or even within the episodes as you go through it. So at its core, this is a sandbox game similar to its original game, but it's broken up into stories that are going to evolve called that sandbox adventure, all while you go ahead and explore the world, explore various interaction points, try to grow the world around you, interact with the various points on the board, interact with NPCs, possibly play with AI characters. In the game, you effectively can play as a 3 to 5 player game, just going through it the way you typically would in Western Legends. But if you're playing it below 3 players, even as a solo game, you have these automa characters that will give you their own little rule set as to how they operate, each with their own different flavor. So you can play a fully automa game, playing it solo with 2 automa characters, or you can play a 2-player game with 1, or you can just play 3 to 5 players as you normally would for a competitive adventure where you're trying to get as many legendary points as possible while getting into the occasional duel. And of course, because it's Western Legends, you'll be expanding your character with gear, with items, with weapons, with mounts, whiskey, all these various things from the general store over here. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into the review side of things, starting off with a personal question of, am I keeping it or not? And for right now, the answer is yes. I'll get more into this, into the why or why not, but effectively, Western Legends is a game that for right now, I do plan on adding this to my collection. Whether or not it's a long-term edition, I don't yet know, because this game is going to offer you effectively 3 things. It's going to offer you the initial play, the ongoing final game, which I haven't gotten to try at all, and that initial game, of course, will be going through the series of episode arcs, where you're exploring and adding to the game each time, and so that sense of progression is going to keep me invested, at least at first. Then there's going to be the final game, where you get to the end of it, and you have that ongoing, you can just continue playing this as is, which I haven't got to a chance to explore that myself or try that, but I will say usually I'm not that much a fan of a final state in a game that had expanding exploration along the way. And then of course the third way is simply resetting it and replaying it. And so I don't yet know about those other 2 parts. Resetting it and replaying it will of course have some degree of being able to interact with things you'd never interact with your first time. And I also know that my favorite Legacy games, I've certainly been fine going back to them after a year or 2 have passed and re-exploring that world. If I really like a Legacy game, and again this is more campaign than Legacy, but if I really like a game in that genre, I am willing to dive back in from the start. But those things are things I'm unwilling to say for right now. What I am willing to say is I've certainly enjoyed this enough that I do want to go through that entire episode arc from start to finish when this game actually has that, as opposed to the prototype I have in front of me. As far as why or why not, why am I keeping it, why am I not keeping it, in this case, why am I keeping it? The short answer is the exploration really does elevate the game. I like Legacy games to begin with, and I also like Western Legends to begin with. I have complaints about Western Legends, which are less present, but still a little present here, but for me, this takes a game that I already enjoy, Western Legends, it takes a sandboxy feel of being able to make your own way in the world, and it combines that with a Legacy campaign element where things are expanding as you go. To me, the fact that you have this kind of arc of, ooh, what am I going to do? Am I going to go to the forest? Am I going to explore a new region? Am I going to go to the mine, the trading post? Am I going to hold up the trading post and start moving towards the wanted? Those are all decisions you already have in this game, but it's further pushed by the fact that you have this deck of cards, this episode deck, that is going to give you this thing you're working your way towards. There's an inherent incentive to look at the things on the table that you want to work towards in order to progress your way through the story and be able to knock those out. And we see the different cards, and there's a card that says explore a forest, and you go to the forest and you do that, and I want to go ahead to the trading post, and then we have this new character we want to interact with, and so you have all these ways, and suddenly there's a holdout and you have to shoot a character to progress, or you don't because there's that other card. So these decks of cards that are going to give you this sense of progression forward as to why you want to do that next thing takes an already solid system of a sandbox adventure and really makes it feel like much more of a story, much more of an exploration. It incentivizes you, or I guess me, to want to go through that, to complete the episode you're currently in, and then to suddenly figure out, okay, great, what did we unlock and what else are we doing in this game? What else can we go through? And so this game gives me a sandbox adventure, lots of ways to earn points, the choice between going martial or wanted, and then a sense of trying to progress forward. The sense of progression in this is incredibly strong as far as why I want to continue playing. I like legacy and campaign games that are more in a manageable size, and this, I believe they're aiming for 7 episodes if I'm not mistaken. I might be slightly mistaken around that because there is the tutorial episode and there's the final game, so I'm not entirely sure of the exact number, but they're aiming for a very manageable size. So this is not a campaign game that I'm going to get bogged down by and never really finish. Rather, this is the kind of game I can go through, I can play with my friends, I can play it solo, and I can get that story as we all try to figure out our own pathway in the world, occasionally dueling with each other, sometimes dueling with the either the AI characters, the NPCs or whatnot, and so I really get a strong sense of journey, sandbox, and incentive to continue playing from this experience. As far as adjacent game experience, if you're looking for things that this either replaces, feel similar and all that, this does very much feel reminiscent to Ticket to Ride Legends of the West, another competitive legacy game that is very different in the gameplay style, but especially the way the map is slowly going to expand, and also just the theme and time period. It felt very reminiscent to Ticket to Ride Legends of the West, although again, I'm only playing a single episode here, and very different gameplay mechanics, just the overarching feeling of exploration and a competitive legacy game, although again, this is not legacy, this is campaign, it just feels legacy to me, definitely pulled me in. I'll also say that it feels reminiscent to Forsaken. Forsaken was a game that kind of took the Western Legends game style and then brought it to a different universe, and I thought it was more immersive in the story elements and the way that game progressed. That game too, Forsaken, it's not a game that's out yet, you can check it out from Game Trays, but effectively, Forsaken is a game that invested you into that desire to keep doing the next thing because of the way it gave you these story choices and these interaction points to go through and the story that you're being read as you go through it. And so that one was built more as a single shot game with story that would be different every time you played it, but it does have similar DNA, so I got very similar vibes from those two experiences. As far as a counter opinion, why this might be, like, for me, this is a game I'm enjoying, this is a game I want to play, but what are reasons that it might not work for you? First of all, I do think that the combat system in Western Legends is not significantly rewarding. It often comes down to playing a higher card. Yes, there's things you can do around that. Yes, there's mitigation and other stuff and abilities. But for the most part, a lot of it comes down to managing your hand of cards, playing a higher card, and winning in combat, which to me, as far as various combat systems there are in games, feels less rewarding compared to other games out there. I'll also say that like most games, I shouldn't say like most games, I should say in most games, the forever mode of a game that had exploration and expanding aspects, I rarely find those are worth playing. So for me, there might be a forever mode at the end of this, but if you're expanding through the map, if you're adding things you can do, and you get to that forever mode, I usually find that suddenly the game is less satisfying because it's everything it was until now without the expandingness to it, which for me is less satisfying personally, or at least historically has been less satisfying. So you definitely want to take that into account. I would absolutely, I shouldn't say not recommend it. I was going to say not recommend it. That's not the words I want to use. For me, I'm recommending this based on the idea of going through a single arc of the game, and the unknowns for me are whether you will keep playing it after or whether I'll be inclined to revisit down the road. Now the good news is because it's not legacy and because it is campaign, even if you go through that single arc, you can still gift it to a friend, trade it, resell it, and you'll still have that full aspect of a fully playable experience that you're not destroying as you go. So while the episode count compared to a typical legacy game is definitely shorter, it's also not a one-shot game that you're destroying every single time you play. I'll also say that if you don't like Automa players in games, and if you are inclined to play this at 1 or 2 players, this might not be for you. I did find the Automa fairly streamlined as far as Automas go. It was not overly complicated. They go through a quick procedural action. I would say for me personally, I preferred the Automa at a 2-player game than at a solo game. As a solo game, even though the Automa runs pretty smoothly, I just feel less satisfying going on that exploration on my own while having these Automa players in the way. It just felt a little less satisfying to me. At 2 players, I thought it worked well enough that there's this 3rd player we kind of can, it's fun because you can kind of take that experience of the 2 players. If you do want to get in like shootouts or attacking other players in the game, you can take that aggression out on this Phantom AI player without even having to go toe-to-toe with each other, unless, of course, and until you do. And then, obviously, of course, I cannot speak for the full experience. This is very much a first impressions review based on a single episode of Western Legend Stories. As far as rating and final thoughts on this one, I'm giving this a 4.5 out of 5. I really like the game, but I do want to note that this is very much motivated by that sense of exploration and progression. I do find legacy games in general do elevate a game experience. Something about that exploring, something about that adding to the game, something about the desire to do one more thing because the game's going to get bigger and do more and let you have more opportunities for ways to engage with the system. I find that elevates the game experience, and when it's built upon Western Legends that I already enjoyed, I think this is a very solid game. My biggest issues with Western Legends were that the combat I do feel is a little less satisfying, and that much is true here as well. And then I felt that the downtime between turns in Western Legends was very not ideal. I've played a 5-player game of Western Legends once, and I never want to do that again. I would say that I definitely recommending this at lower player counts based on my experiences. I have not played this at 5, but just based on where it is. I do think the turns are more streamlined compared to the original Western Legends, although again, that's based on where this first episode is. I can't speak for how streamlined the turns are going to be as you add more and more across the various episodes. So overall, a 4.5 out of 5, and it's very much biased and based on the exploration and progression, not necessarily based on a final game experience. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.